Hi everyone, my name is Janet Salem and I'm from Footprint Lab. You might remember me from session 1 where I presented on the types of data that you can use for your carbon accounting and also talked a little bit about the policy. So apologies, I couldn't join today live, but I would like to share module 8 in any case by video. I'm going to share screen now. Okay. Great. So hopefully you can see the map. Actually, let me just introduce module 8. I'm going to talk about the regulatory landscape because your role in carbon accounting is going to be affected by what countries and companies have decided to do about this. So let's take a look. Well, it all starts when a company decides to set a net zero target. And that means there are no net emissions to the atmosphere. Very good. So here you can see which countries in the world have set a net zero target. And I really encourage you to go to zerotracker.net so that you can explore interactively. But and also the different colors mean something. So the dark green here is where that net zero target is actually being passed into law. And then the lighter green, orange, and blue are slightly less enforceable net zero targets. Very interesting. So I know a lot of you are working in different countries, so you can explore, what is the policy in my area. So what follows is that a lot of companies then set net zero targets. So I've gone into the net zero tracker and I've just isolated the first few rows of Indian companies that have set net zero targets. And you can see there is a traffic light system in terms of, probably how firm or how documented these targets are and whether they include the scope 3. So you can go into more detail at the URL. And this was just the first, I think there are about 3 times as many companies. But what you'll tend to see is companies that cross multiple, that work internationally will be more likely to set a net zero target. Okay, another thing that can happen is, and it's one of the drivers for companies to actually do that, is that countries introduce a carbon price mechanism. Now, that means that you will need to account for the carbon footprint of your operations and then pay a price of some sort, whether it's a tax, a levy, an adjustment mechanism to cover what they call the external cost of the carbon. And so again, really, really great. Another website, this one's Carbon Pricing Dashboard at the World Bank, and the URL is in the slides. So you can see which countries, and sometimes it's subnational, so different states will introduce different prices. So you can see which ones are pursuing it. And then also just some of them are scheduled for implementation and the carbon tax is already implemented. And just that, I thought it was quite interesting to have a look at what the price was. And I thought, as I'm talking to accountants, well, you might be interested as well. But you can see here, this is a list of countries and regions subnationally. Don't worry about who they are. You can explore if you want. But you can see a huge range, from just a few dollars to over $150 a ton. So it's really quite a range that you can see, and maybe presents quite a risk to companies' operations. And this is why it's something that's gone up to the board level of monitoring. Now, last time in session 1, I talked about Indian policy references to ESG accounting because we had been a bit focused on India. But I know you work in multiple countries. Now, the most key thing is the BRSR Core Framework for Assurance and ESG Disclosures for the Value Chain, which says that in a staged introduction, companies will need to disclose on the ESG of the value chain. not only your own operations, but also the suppliers and the suppliers of the suppliers and so forth. And they're saying this should cover 75% of purchases. And at the time, the Reserve Bank of India was quite active on talking about climate risk and sustainable finance. And there was mention of even introducing a carbon price here. And just last year, a few months ago, India led the G20, and in the outcome document, which is called the Leaders' Declaration, they actually specifically mentioned carbon accounting and the need to adopt sort of international compliant methods of carbon accounting. But since then, it was quite interesting to see that India made climate risk disclosures mandatory for banks. Again, a phased implementation, but starting from the next financial year. So that was the headline. And then starting here where it says 7.4, I've just taken a snapshot of the actual communication from the Reserve Bank of India, where they talk about the metrics and targets. So here they're saying that they do want to include scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions. So it's not only your own energy and electricity use, but it's also your supply chain. So things that you're purchasing, including property, including equipment, including paper, including legal services, accounting services, anything you spend money on. Okay. Now, if you're working in another country, you didn't have time to cover all countries, but a really great source of information about what's happening in your country is the Climate Action Tracker, CAT. So if you go into this website, and again, all websites I've linked, there's an overview of the policies in there. Another one, which I find very useful, is to see what our country level CFOs are talking about, our finance ministers. And there is a coalition of finance ministers for climate action led by Indonesia and I believe the Netherlands. And this is the link to the 10th ministerial meeting, which is where you'll find a document where each finance minister has listed what they would like to do as a finance minister about climate change. So you'll see things like budget tagging. So they want to tag in public budgets where there's a climate impact, or some of them refer to introducing a carbon price. Okay, so I'll stop there. Thank you very much and hope to see you in one of the future webinars.